Hello and welcome to the Quarantined Wargamer. I'm Big Lee and today I want to discuss the art of tidying up. So for many people at the moment, we're all finding ourselves with a little bit more time on our hands than perhaps we're comfortable with, either because you've been furloughed or maybe unfortunately laid off, or simply because you can't get out at the weekends and on bank holidays and so on. And there's a lot of pressure, especially from idiots like me, to telling you to go out there and keep yourself busy and get on with painting and modelling projects and gaming and going online. And these are all laudable pursuits and I heartily recommend them. But there is one more thing I would like to suggest that you might be able to do with your time. Tidying up your workspace. So now is an ideal time to have a tidy up of your workspace, and this is particularly true if you don't have a dedicated workspace, man cave, or even a shed down the end of the garden. And I've always found that a good tidy up is not only good for the soul, it's also good for the mental health, because it's taking back control of what is otherwise a chaotic situation. Now, I'm not talking about the taking back control that politicians try and sell you. I'm talking about actual taking back control from the chaos that is a work surface or a desk covered in stuff. Anyone that ever claims that they know where everything is when they're pointing at a pile of mess, they're either lying or self-deluded. So I've always found that a good tidy up is good to help you organise things, to get a priority list in your head of what's actually important, to be able to dig through the mess to get to what needs to be done. So I've been an office administrator for well over 30 years, and I can categorically state that a good tidy up is always good for productivity, and the same rule applies whether it's your painting desk or your work desk at work. A good tidy up helps you to cut through all the mess and get to the important stuff. So let's start with your painting desk. Now, if you're lucky, you've got a fully functioning painting station in your own room, but you could just as easily be working from a paint tray that you pull out on an ad hoc basis. It doesn't matter whether it's large or small, it can still benefit from a good tidy up, and being organised about where things are and what you have to hand will improve your productivity. So for the painting table surface itself, I always think it's useful to have the most used items directly to hand. So we're talking about those essential tools and glues and paints and things that you use every single painting session should be within line of sight and easily accessible. So for instance, I will have a selection of my most used tools, things like tweezers and needle files and a knife, obviously. These sort of things get used every single painting session, so I have them right where I can see them and where I can easily access them. I also have obviously my most used paints there where I can see them, where I can access them easily, and usually a selection of most useful glue, so super glue obviously, because that gets used a hell of a lot. So these are all things that I want on my immediate work surface so that I can easily access them. You're also going to have a selection of your most used brushes, your old friends, your old favourites, all within line of sight as usual. So for me, that's 4 or 5 fine detail brushes. You know, my high quality ones, I use Winsor & Newtons, but whatever's your favourite set of brushes. Then I usually have another set which is slightly more workaday stuff for general painting, for block painting and stuff like that. So again, still good quality. I always buy Sable brushes, but they're cheaper brushes than the Winsor & Newtons that I use. And I'll also have a selection of dry brushes of various different sizes and shapes, maybe 4 or 5 of those. I have a large stock of spare brushes, but I don't keep them on my desk because I don't need them. I will keep them stored away for when I need to swap some of my old favourites around, so when things wear out. And I always try to look after my brushes anyway, so I keep them stored away so that I know that I've got some spares when I need them. So whatever your tools are, it's important to keep them within line of sight, front and centre, exactly where you can see them and handle them quickly. So moving away from your work surface, we now get to those slightly less used items that you still need to be able to access easily, but don't perhaps need every single painting session. So in my case, there's a drawer immediately below my work surface, and in there I will keep a selection of my slightly more useful but less used tools. So things like metal saws and special tweezers and other items, things like the little hand drills that you use for pinning models together. I don't need them every single painting session, but I do need them close to hand, because if I do need them, I don't want to go rummaging all around my room trying to find them. So they will be kept in a drawer immediately below my work surface, but you could have them anywhere as long as they're close to hand. So I'll also include things like a ready supply of the lollipop sticks for mounting models on, and other pieces of wood, wire. Again, items that are useful, get used regularly, but not used every time. So they need to be kept fairly close to hand. Now we come to those items that aren't used very regularly, but you still need to know where they are. So in my case, things like equipment that gets used on an ad hoc basis. So things like my Dremel electric drill. I don't often use it, but I do need to be able to find it when I want to use it. My static grass applicator obviously only gets used when I've finished a project, so it's not used every single painting session. Again, I need to be able to find it and access it quickly and easily, so I have some storage in my room away from the painting desk, so that I can store those sort of items very easily. Also things like spare paints and my other supplies of inks and various things that my extra stuff that I'm keeping that replaces the used items on my desks. So my extra storage of supplies that I've got. I'll also keep things like all my cans of varnish and paint all there, so that it's stored away from the paint desk. I don't need it every single painting session, but I do need to be able to access them quickly. So the same principle should apply to your models. They are, after all, our very special toys, and we should be looking after them. And I would hazard a guess that most wargamers probably look after their miniatures better than they do their equipment and supplies. But again, there's always room for improvement here. So people have different ways of storing their figures. Now, it was quite common to see people storing stuff in the cardboard file boxes, and indeed many people still do, but it's largely dependent on the type of space that they're being stored in. So for instance, I wouldn't necessarily recommend a cardboard storage box if where all your figures is actually down a shed that may get damp or cold. Inside in a nice warm building, that's probably fine. But if you're going to store your items in a shed, perhaps you're lucky enough to have a war game shed, and you're going to be storing figures in there, probably it'd be better to keep them in some sort of plastic box. So nowadays it's quite common to see people using things like the really useful boxes or something similar to store their figures in. I think here the main question to ask yourself is the room warm or not? Does it get damp? So if it's an internal room inside your home, then the likelihood is it's going to be warm, it's going to be reasonably dry. You don't need to worry too much. Cardboard boxes will probably be sufficient so long as you're stacking them properly. Obviously, again, if it's cold, a particularly cold room, or maybe a loft room, or down a shed where it's likely to get cold or may even be damp, then you need something that is going to protect your figures a lot better. So I would always recommend plastic if possible. Wherever you're storing your miniatures, I have an extra card up my sleeve for protecting them. So it doesn't matter whether it's a cold shed or a cold room inside the house. What you don't want is any dampness getting onto your models and damaging that paintwork, or worse still, mould. If you don't use those figures particularly often, or you're storing something for a very long period of time, you'd be surprised. Mould can get everywhere. And the way I get around that is to use things like these, silicone desiccant packs. Now these, I've got them in different sizes. You can buy them relatively cheaply on places like eBay, but to be honest, all of the ones that I've got, and I've got hundreds now, I picked up out of packages that I've been sent. So you'll often get electronic equipment and other things coming with these packs already inside. I always keep them, the whole family know to keep them for me, and I'll put them in whatever boxes I'm storing my models in. So as you may have seen from my walk around of my operations room, I now have metal filing cabinets with all my figures in. I keep plenty of desiccant packs in all of those trays. Every single tray has a pack in it, and I will occasionally take those packs out and dry them out, just to make sure that everything in there is staying nice and dry. And that would be even more important if your storage is in a shed, for instance, or in a loft. So again, desiccant packs, you can pick them up really cheaply on places like eBay, but you can get them for free if you just keep collecting them whenever you receive parcels. So however you're storing your stuff, or wherever you're storing it, I would also recommend that you label everything properly. Now, I know I'm anal, I can't help it, it's just the way I'm built, but I do heartily recommend it nonetheless. So that means stuff that you don't get to use very regularly, and may, to be honest, forget where you've put it, if you've labelled stuff nice and clearly, you can find things a lot quicker. Now, that's obviously harder when you've got stuff stored around the house, but the last thing you want to be doing is spending half an hour rummaging through various cupboards and opening up different boxes trying to figure out where that piece of equipment is or where that particular set of models are. Now, obviously, if you're lucky enough, like me, to have a dedicated games room, it's a little bit easier because you should, in theory, know where everything is. But a good, nice, big coloured label isn't going to do any harm. It means you can lay your hands on things a lot quicker, and you can concentrate on doing the things that are important, like playing that game, laying out that scenery, doing that painting project, and spending less time rummaging through boxes and cupboards trying to find something that really you should know where it is in the first place. Now, of course, I apply this principle to all my miniatures and, of course, to my tools and equipment, but I also do it for all my painted terrain. So, as you can see behind me, I've got trays, they're all labelled, and I tend to keep my terrain divided by different scales and different settings. So desert terrain separate from terrain for Northwest Europe, for instance. The idea being is that I can quickly and easily find all of the available terrain for a particular setting, so I can lay out a game very quickly. And again, I've seen plenty of people with tons of terrain, lovely stuff, and it's scattered all over the place, and they can't find that one item they're looking for. They need a windmill. Now, where did I put it? Or a particular set of walling for a 6mm game or something like that. You know, a little bit of organisation, a little bit of time gathering it all together and putting like-minded stuff together can save you loads of time in the long run. Now, I hasten to add, you don't have to follow my plan, it's just the way I do things, but whatever you do, sort out your own organisation. As long as you understand where everything is and you've got it clearly labelled and you stick to that plan, you should be able to find things quickly and easily. And at the end of the day, that's the whole purpose of this video, is to help you to organise yourself, as opposed to having an unorganised mess and going, oh yeah, I know where everything is, but in fact you don't really. So one final idea I'd like to advocate for is a clear desk policy. Now, this is something that I've always done at work. Some colleagues do, some colleagues don't, but I apply the same principle to my painting desk. And essentially that means that when you get to the end of a painting session, you have a brief tidy up to put everything back where it belongs. So you've been getting tools out and pieces of paint and stuff. I put everything back. So I will put all my tools back in their rack, and their paintbrushes will be cleaned. I always clean my brushes at the end of a painting session, so I use a brush soap, and I'll spend a good 5 or 10 minutes doing a brush cleaning session at the end, because what I don't want is my very expensive brushes to get damaged. And I'll then sweep the painting desk, in my case, to clear any rubbish off, and pieces of metal and offcuts of wood and all those sorts of things. Rather than leaving them scattered around, I'll sweep all that up and throw them away. And it's all about basically preparing yourself for the next painting session, so that when you go, right, I'm going to get some painting done tonight, you don't have to spend 10 minutes clearing space before you can even start putting paint on metal. So clearing your painting area and putting everything back where it belongs just means that when you do come back to painting later, you can just crack straight on. So our painting stations, our workrooms, our sheds down in the garden, they can all get messy at times. It happens to the best of us. And a good clear up is not only good for productivity, but it's also good for your mental health. It's clearing the decks, making yourself in control of what is otherwise a chaotic situation. So, do you agree with me? Do you think I'm talking cobblers? Or have you found this useful? How do you organise yourself? Maybe you have some tips and tricks that you'd like to share. Please feel free to do so in the comments below. All comments are welcome, so long as they're positive comments and not rude. And by all means, if you want to, pop over to my blog, Big Lee's Miniature Adventures, continue the discussion on there. So if you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, and as I've already mentioned, please leave your comments below. So it just leaves me to say I hope that you're all managing to keep well and keep safe, and whatever the changes are to social distancing rules where you live, that I hope you're managing to find a way through them to keep yourselves safe. See you again next week, and in the meantime, keep rolling high.